Welcome to Birds Spray Sports, where we weekly cover Ravens and Orioles news. We're your hosts, TJ and Jared. And in this video, we're finally here. Week one of the NFL season, week one of the Ravens season. We're going to be going up. I'm getting some tears in my eyes just talking about it. We're going up against the Buffalo Bills, a rematch of the divisional round playoff game in which we unfortunately fell out short last year. This game will be coming on NBC 8:20. Prime time game is the real deal, and so, just to get into this video, we're going to, be talking about our predictions, the players we expect to have, our bold breakout players of the game and, all the segments we had last year, so, let's just get into it, man. I'm excited. I'm been thinking about this game all week, a little bit nervous, but, one point that me and you have been talking about all week, and especially that's been coming to my mind is we got to start fast. Last year we started out slow. We started out 0-2, and you'll see all these people say, "Oh, it's not how you start; it's how you finish." But when you're a good team in the NFL, it is most important how you start.
Yep.
Because we started out, like I said, we started out 0-2 last year, ended up being 12-5. If we had won just one of those games that we started out 0-2, we'll be 13-4. We will be hosting the Bills,
Right.
and maybe and the outcome would have been different, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's very important that we win this game tonight. This game is possibly the most important, most biggest week one game in Ravens history. I feel like this game is a must win tonight just to get out on the right track and, to win any potential tiebreakers that we're going to have to face, towards the end, because the seeding is important. Having home field advantage is important, and I'll mention him here. I was watching Graven's video, yesterday, and he was saying how a lot of Ravens fans like being an underdog. This team isn't built to be an underdog. We're built to be, the favorite to win. I don't want this team to be an underdog this year, because that's not the expectations we have being an underdog. We have an expectation of being Super Bowl champions. And, champions are never underdogs. They're the top pick. So it's imperative that we win tonight and start off, just on the right foot, 1-0. So, I want to hear your, I was going to say perspective. I want to hear your thoughts. What are you thinking?
Yeah. No, I mean, like you had mentioned earlier, we talked about this on Thursday or on maybe Thursday or Wednesday, whatever day it was. How important this game is. That how this week one can really shape up the rest of the season. Um, and yeah, I definitely agree with you and Engraven said. About how we need to stop playing this underdog story. We're too talented of a team to be underdogs, like how you had said. And it's kind of something I've been mentioning the past few seasons, where it's just like I'm sick of when the Ravens have expectations, they just can't live up to them. That they can always seem to fall short. They always seem to get in their own way. And I see a lot of fan bases complain, when we say, oh, we beat ourselves. I've seen a lot of fan bases complain when we say that, but it's genuinely the truth. We beat ourselves a lot. And this game right here to me is like a complete opposite of how last year's opener was, because the thing about last year's team is we didn't know what to expect. We had lost a lot of guys offensively, defensively. We lost a lot of guys in the coaching staff, but this year we brought in a whole bunch of guys defensively, offensively, and the coaching staff. It's different this year, man. This year's I didn't know what to expect last year's opening game. Especially after get to the AFC Championship game, lose a whole bunch of guys. Like, you didn't know what to expect. But this year, you have heartbreak from Buffalo. Back in the that team that was kind of pieced together piece by piece in the offseason made it to the divisional round. They had Super Bowl aspirations still, no matter what. With the team they have assembled now, you get D Hop, you get Alexander, you bring in Pagano, you bring in a whole bunch of guys for the coaching staff, and this team is just too good now. Oh, and then you draft Malachi Starks and Mike Green. The only thing I could really be possibly concerned about is maybe the special teams, but I really hope that they got the special teams on lock. That's another thing for this year, this game in particular, and the rest of this year is special teams. And I don't mean just Tyler Loop. I mean Stout. I mean the punt return, the kick return, all that stuff. Because it just feels like the Ravens have lacked a lot, especially in special teams the last few seasons, and that's surprising considering John Harbaugh used to be very, very, uh, I don't know what word to use here, very passionate about the special teams, over his tenure with the Ravens. So it was surprising to see how poorly they've played over the last few seasons. They don't get a lot of kick return yardage, they don't get a lot of punt return yardage. It's always a fair catch. It's always they let the ball go behind him or whatever. We don't got like a dangerous punt returner. So guys like Keaton Mitchell or Justice Hill or LeJontay Wester, and obviously Jordan Stout, he can't be having these stinker punts, in these games. He's gotta, if we got to punt, which I hope we don't, but if we do have to punt, pin him back, like pin him back. Come on, man. Like this is your like third or fourth year in the league, bro. Like you got to lock in some of these punts, So none of these duds, that we see from you every once in a while. It feels like Sam Cook never had a dud. Sam Cook was always reliable. He's pinning you back, to the goal line every time, and that gave our defense a hell of an advantage, because, I mean, our defense was ferocious. And that's another thing as well. Our defense has got to be ferocious. They got to cause turnovers. They got to play, hothead football. I don't know what you want to call it, So, they need to be as good as advertised, is what I'm saying, So, and that includes tonight's game. Those guys over there, they took your season away from you last year. So go ahead and start their season on one.
Yeah, and I agree. And some things you said there were very true. I remember this offseason, I remember seeing Marlon Humphrey post on his story. They were looking at the 2000 Ravens defense and how much turnovers they cost. And
Hmm.
last year we only got 17 turnovers.
Hmm.
Now that may seem like middle of the pack, we're like not really something to like have concern over, but when you're a Ravens defense, you want to have more than 17 turnovers. And especially translating that into the playoffs, which we aspire to be, not looking ahead of our opponents, but we need to create a lot more turnovers this year. We need to cause more havoc, and we need to be feared. I don't think teams feared us last year. I feel like they feared us in 2023, but even before 2023, I feel like we kind of lost that fear factor that we were, giving to other teams. I feel like this year we can get that back. Like you said, we brought in guys like Chuck Pagano. We still got Dean Pease. We brought in that safeties coach from the Chiefs, who I can never remember his name, but it's like
Delario,
Delario. Yeah,
Sario,
yeah,
Delario.
Delario. Yeah, just guys who can, and Delasario and Pagano are both have to do with the secondary. So, they're gonna really, infuse our secondary and help them out a lot when it comes to getting interceptions and just, being in the right positions when it comes to, Mike or Zach or calling out those plays. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited. But
I'm going to mention one last thing. It's actually about the defense as well. The defense, one of the most important things for me this season is, can they generate pressure with four? Can they get four guys in the defensive front generate pressure? How many sacks did we get in 2023 and four that were simulated or generated pressure from, a blitz that, was, what do they call those? I'm trying to think about those type of blitzes that the Ravens are very famous for. Um, the stunt blitz, a stunt play. Yeah, so like they get a lot of those, confusion plays where they got guys coming through, whatever. They generate a lot of pressure schematically, but can they generate pressure from just four? Let the guys cover, let everyone in the freaking backfield, defensive backs, linebackers, go out there and cover the guys in the field, and can four bring it home? Meaning Green, Van Noy, Metabike, Jones, or away Green, Metabike, Peebles, whatever. So like, can they bring pressure with four? And that's going to be, you know, huge, come postseason time as well, because I mean, we're having to simulate a lot of pressure with, our safeties and our cornerbacks, which is fine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but you're taking some defensive backs off the field, at this point. You're taking them out of the play. So if we can have our defensive backs, like Wiggins and Humphrey and Hamilton, kind of stay in coverage and have our four, create havoc. I mean, think about how like we lost to the Eagles last year. They generated, pressure with four the whole game. That's one of the games last year that I can look at and say we didn't beat ourselves. We just lost. Because the Eagles generated a lot of pressure with four. had a lot of the defensive backs in coverage. A lot of guys weren't getting open, and that allowed the Eagles to feast all game. So that's going to be important for us all season. Is you know can we generate pressure with Ford?
Yeah. And not to mention Justin Tucker also messed that game up for us.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
the Eagles, were putting some serious pressure on us, and they were the better team that night. That's a great reference there. But I also want to just touch on our offense for this game too. Shifting to the other side of the field there. I think that I'm excited to see guys like how D Hop will operate in the offense this year. We expect a lot from Zay, who I feel like people forget that he didn't even play in the division round game last year. I don't even people never mention that whenever they talk about that game. That's a big piece of our offense right there we were missing. So I
Yeah.
feel like Zay is going to have a good game. I feel like Bateman's going to have a good game. He really stepped up until he got hurt in that game, and we
Yeah.
didn't have him as well in that last drive. But D Hop is a guy that I feel like people are underrating. I feel like people are just writing him off as that old dude who, we won't expect that much from him. And granted, I mean, I don't think he'll be like, Cardinals D Hop or even Texans D Hop, but I feel like he'll find his role, in the Ravens offense. And when you're focusing on guys like Zay Flowers, Bateman, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, you know, D Hop is going to be bound to, slip through the cracks and get a big play here and there. So, and Derrick Henry, how could I forget about him? So I expect a good season from D Hop, and I feel like he'll make some plays in this game as well. You know,
It's going to be interesting to see how the Ravens are going to, maneuver their offense today without Patrick Ricard, because I mean Ricard's a big part of the offense for the most part, but that means that, our guys like, our interior guys, meaning Falele and Voorhees, Linderbaum, and then obviously our outside guys, Rosengarten and Stanley, all of our offensive line, they're in for a big game for them. For them, they need to, push the pile today. Because Ricard is obviously a luxury to have on the field when he's out there, but those guys are gonna have to show why why we may be underrating them. Because I think I still look at our line and I'm a little concerned, with some of the guard play, especially, you know, um, but it's going to be their time to show that they can block with five as well. That's the the opposite of what I was talking about with the defensive front, the offensive line. Can we block with five? Can we block with five and have our pass catchers out there like Andrews and and Hopkins and Flowers and Bateman and all these guys? So I feel like it's going to be a big game for them because they need to show that they have the capabilities of blocking with five and generating pressure with four. Those the two trench battles are going to be very key in this game, and they always will be key in every game. But these games in particular, this is where you win the games. Is the trenches, and if you can't win the trenches, then we got dominated in the trenches in the first half in the Bills game. In the divisional round, that's why we were down 21-10 at half. We were down 17-7 versus the Chiefs because we got guess what? We got dominated in the trench game. The Ravens need to focus on the trenches more as much as they focus on their weapons, on the defensive backs, the wide receivers and their tight ends. The amount of focus they put in that, they need to put in the trenches as well. And hopefully our guys, or hopefully Falele takes the next step. Voorhees gets off on the right foot, and all that stuff so that because we're not going to go anywhere if our trenches are going to suck, so they need to lock in tonight.
yeah, 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 yeah. They do, and just to add, one more point about the offense. I feel like, you know, if we get the trenches going, and win that battle, I expect the run game to really take off. But
Yeah.
one thing I think we can exploit is the Bills secondary. They're
Yeah.
really banged up. Their star rookie first round pick, he's on IR. I don't think Tre'Davious White is playing. Christian Benford, your best corner, is a little bit banged up, I heard as well. So they really have they have a 6th round pick they could put out there, and I think another 7th round pick corner. Those guys going up against Zay, I feel like that's a great matchup to exploit.
Yeah.
And their safeties aren't really that good. Not no disrespect, but their safeties are a little bit of a weakness as well. Like Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin, weren't really playing that well even in the preseason games. So I feel
Mhm.
like that's a weakness we could exploit as well through the air.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we should. Lamar should. Lamar can pick apart, a defense when it's banged up, and he definitely should tonight.
Yeah, and especially if they blitz, you know.
If
But
they blitz, then the guy should be wide open free, bro.
oh
Like,
yeah, for sure, for sure. But moving on, we got to talk about our bold predictions of the game. So I'm gonna pass it to you. What do you expect?
I think a bold prediction is, hmm, a bold prediction for me is, I don't know if this is really a bold prediction, but we haven't really seen it as much. But I think Lamar goes 4 touchdowns tonight. In the
Oh,
air too, not on the ground and in the air combined. I think he gets 4 touchdowns in the air
okay.
tonight. I know this might be crazy to say, but that's kind of what I was referencing, earlier. Not earlier, but when you were talking about their banged up secondary. That's what I was thinking about earlier, and I'm like, Lamar could really feast on these guys.
Yeah, well, Lamar, I need you to at least run in a touchdown because I got a bet on that. But anyway, I'm just playing. But
I don't
you
give a shit about it.
know, but my bold prediction is I think we're gonna come in and spank them. I really, feel like the Ravens should come in. I know it's not a playoff game. It's not entirely revenge, but you are starting right where you ended last year. That's got to feel personal to you. And that has to be avenged in some way. And I feel like, we got to come in, we got to punch him in the mouth, and we got to, get a little bit of get back. So I feel like when we come in, we beat them. I've been seeing the score 37-13 in my head. I think that we got to shut down Josh Allen and, put that belt to him. So that's my bold prediction. We come in and beat him.
I think the Ravens win this game 38 to 21. I think that it's relatively a close game for most of it, but I think that the Ravens have a turnover that, kind of pushes the game forward in our favor. I could see us winning like 28-21 at a point. We cause a turnover and then get another touchdown, and then they go for on fourth down and they miss, and then we kick a field goal and make it 38-21. So I don't know if it's going to be a blowout, but I definitely think that the Ravens can win by multiple scores. And I think we start the season 1-0.
Yeah, and so that's your score prediction. Mine is, as I just mentioned, was 37-13. I don't really no stats really come to mind. Like I do feel like Derrick Henry will get a rushing touchdown. I feel like Lamar will get a couple passing ones. So I'll just leave it at that. But I really just want this to be a dominating win. Because I'm tired of people disrespecting the Ravens or not knowing how to cover them when it comes to their expert analysis. I just want the season to start out with like a statement. So
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
feeling.
Absolutely. We gotta start doing something like predicting the other games, like who we think is gonna win and lose. Like
Oh yeah,
that's
for
kind of
sure.
hard now because the game's already going on. But
We can start. We can start that within in week two.
all
In
right,
pre-
bet. So I'll probably pull up a sheet. We can predict the other games, not scores, just like who we think is gonna win,
yeah,
because like that would take too long. So, but yeah. So no stats this week. Obviously, it's week 1, so there's not gonna be any stats. I feel like covering last year's stats would be a moot point. So but they don't turn the ball very often. They didn't turn the ball over very often last year, and I think that's going to be an anomaly. I think they're going to turn the ball over a few times tonight. So I think Allen got away with a few last year. So he's not a dumb football player, but he can make dumb decisions, which any quarterback can, but
yeah,
him in particular. So let's go out there and show him who the real MVP is.
yeah. I knew what you really wanted to say there. I'm just playing, but yeah, yeah. We'll show them who the real MVP is tonight. Hopefully, no me just saying this as disclaimer. No disrespect, to any Bills fans that might be watching this. I just really want us to start off with a statement this year because we were unable to do that last year. So we just really need to show this year that we're mean business. So
Yeah.
that's all I got for this video. You got any last things to add?
Nope, just go flop.
Let's just handle business tonight. Let's go flock. Come back to the bank week 2. But that's all we got for you guys in this video today. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Comment down below your score predictions and your bold predictions. What do you think? What do you guys think is going to happen? Also, follow our social media on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. Make sure, especially Instagram. I know Jared's got a good, Game day Ravens graphic cooked up. He's also making cupcakes tonight. He's coming over watching the game, so he's going to be cooking a lot of things recently. I mean, lately. So make sure you support the Instagram. Also, check out our second channel, Casual Cinema. We're going to be watching him soon, so we're going to have a review on that. And there's probably some other movies coming out too that I gotta look at. But follow that channel, and that's all we got today with Birds Play Sports, and we're up.
We're out.